Testing. Always got to make sure because I've unplugged and unwired. But listen, more importantly, I am joined, I'm going to say the man of the hour, Mr. Andy Clarke, Mr. Blue Shirt. Welcome back.
Thanks very much. I had to leave it at home today. It got a few outings last week, so, I think the public can have too much of a good thing, can't they?
Talk to us about last week. I mean, we were just speaking off camera and it looked absolutely magical from watching it at home. But your words, you were there, you were hosting it. Take us on that journey again.
It was great fun. I really enjoyed it. I've been to Saudi 4 times now for fights, and you're aware of the situation there, and you're aware of the issues, but you can only speak to your own experience and what you find when you get there. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I've thoroughly enjoyed it every time I've been. Last week was bigger and better than anything else I've been to there, which takes some doing, and the investment in it, the infrastructure behind it, the ambition behind it was massive. And every day it just kind of ramped up. The grand arrivals were great in this Times Square recreation, this boulevard complex, which wasn't there last time I went. And the outdoor stadium they built for the undercard, where we had things, I think, 3 days in a row, and then the main hall next door. I snuck into the main hall, I think on the Thursday, just to have a look, and they were in the middle of bringing the ring up underground to ground level. And you just knew at that point that it was going to be something that you'd not really seen before, and it definitely turned out. It definitely turned out to be that. It was huge, and all the old fighters they got over. Other stars from MMA, music, and other sports. It was incredible. I don't think there's been a gathering in one place of that many famous fighters with the amount of accolades and titles ever. Actually, outside of Canastota for the International Boxing Hall of Fame, that'd be the only thing that could rival it. It was quite something, and be interesting to see what happens now. Whether it'll be next year. A few reports the last couple of days from reliable sources are saying next year, aren't they? So I feel like that's probably what will happen. I didn't think it was impossible after the fight that Fury would get held to the 23rd of December, because he's not injured. It's a little bit of damage, but as he said himself, the next day he's not injured. And Usyk just wants to get that fight made, but Usyk probably too doesn't want to get Fury in there, where after the event, should he win, there could be any excuses. So maybe it is next year now.
You know what? That's probably the most rational reason I've heard for a possible postponement. But I want to take you back, Andy. You're getting the email. You sat in your office. You sat at home, and you get the email about the itinerary. So you know your schedule from your flights to how many different events are going to happen that week. What is your face when you open up that email and you look at that itinerary, if it was an email?
You're just pleased because you know you're going to be busy. When you're around those fight weeks, you just want to be in the thick of it and involved. And Queensberry asked me to go quite late on. I thought TalkSport would pick up the rights to the fight, but that's another story. I've done a bit of work with Dev Sani before, when I've just been at press conferences and stuff like that, and I get on well with him. And they asked me just to go over and work with him on the international coverage in the build-up, and I could see that we were doing stuff every day, and it was all in the evening, which made sense because it's not blisteringly hot over there at the minute, but it's hot enough. And then on fight night, bizarrely, I had nothing to do. I can't even remember the last time I worked on a fight week and I had nothing to do on fight night. So if I could have, ideally, there would have been some kind of international commentary to do on the night, but I really enjoyed it, just sitting there and watching. And there's just loads of people, I was sat at ringside, and all of a sudden Spencer Fearon pops up, who I'd seen the night before. I knew he was there, but so sat and had a chat with him. Fraser arrived, Fraser Clarke, particularly for Fabio Wardley, David Adelaide, and there were just people everywhere. I bumped into a few people who I've spoken to but not met before. Teddy Atlas was sat in front of me. Kenny Bayliss, I spoke a few months ago to him for something else I'm working on. Amir was out there, Amir Khan, who I'd arranged to speak to, and it was proving a bit difficult. And then there he was. So it was great. And chatting to people like Lennox Lewis it was bucket list stuff. That parade of champions, and there were so many we wanted to get and didn't quite manage to get. But yeah, I really like getting Jared Anderson and Ricky Hatton and talking about selling tickets and all that kind of thing. And yeah, and then the night itself produced something that we weren't expecting, didn't it? Completely. I mean, I was not expecting that at all. Not at all. I don't think Fury was either. But Ngannou came across great. I didn't know a lot about him, but just carried himself like a champion because he is one. And I really kind of warmed to him. I thought he was fantastic. You know, just really had that star presence. Very respectful, very confident. Just everything you could want, really.
It was enjoyable to watch from our side, and one thing, obviously, you know, I speak to people like yourself. I'm not in front of the camera and doing live streams, but what I liked about you and Dev is, and I said it to you off camera, is that you worked really well together. There was sort of like Dev, and he had this sort of like fanboy style where you were there like the analyst. He would ask like certain questions, but then you'd probably go to some statistic, and it was a really good balance with both of you up there on that stage. Enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, it was enjoyable to do. You know, I had a chat with him before we went, and there was no confusion of roles. He wanted to lead it, and I thought that was the right thing to do as well. So we had a quick chat before we went where, you know, he just needed to kind of check that I was okay with that, which I was, of course. So yeah, it was good. It was good. You know, he's good fun. He's good fun because he works for Queensberry, and therefore, you know, he backs Queensberry fighters to the hilt, but he does it with a bit of humour, so people understand that maybe not everything he says is entirely serious, and this doesn't have to be an entirely serious business all of the time. You know, that's the thing. There has to be a bit of light and shade with boxing, because you can never be flippant about it because it's too serious for that, but it's also too serious to be too serious all the time, if that makes sense. So you have to have that balance. You have to. And Fight Week's kind of the time to do that, because things kind of zero in bit by bit by bit, and then you get to the night and you know that anything can happen. So yeah, he was a good guy to work with. I enjoyed it.
And like I said, we enjoyed watching it. I am going to just pick the two fights that... In fact, no, I'll talk about Joseph Parker, because I'm quite happy that he got that win, and it was a good win for him. We talk about wins because someone can get a win, but it might not be a good win. Joseph Parker, his performance, talk to us about that from your analytical point of view.
Yeah, I thought he boxed well. I think him and Simon Keane were very different. Simon Keane was very intense. We could see that all week. You'd see him in the dining room, kind of eating by himself, just looking very, very intense. And that's how he carried himself all the time. So it wasn't an act. That was him. And I feel like he probably needs to find a way of letting that go a bit. You can't be like that 24/7. I don't think it's just too exhausting. Whereas Parker just was what he normally is, which is relaxed, experienced, confident. And then he would flick the switch when he needed to, and I thought he boxed really nicely, wasn't in a rush. I think there is definitely more to come, and Andy feels like there's more to come since they've been working together. It's such a hard fight against Joyce, obviously, but it doesn't seem to have taken too much away from him. And what they're kind of looking for, and this is very, very sensible, you know, they're realists, is if this fight for undisputed happens, which we assume it will, then even if there is a rematch, the belts will probably splinter at that point. Because you won't have a unification. It'll just be one fighter with all the belts against somebody else, so they won't necessarily all sanction it, and they'll be well positioned because I think he's top 10, top 15 with all four sanctioning bodies. So that's what they're kind of waiting for, because him and Fury are campmates. They're not good. They're pals. They're not going to fight each other. So yeah, I mean, I thought he was good. And then you look at that card and you can match up winners, couldn't you, quite easily? Like Makhmudov, you know, people are talking about that. Parker against Makhmudov. Martin McCauley was really, really good again. Wouldn't necessarily be that heavy by choice. He had an injury, so that was why he came in at nearly 300 pounds. But they loved him over there.
Did they?
Yeah, they loved him over there. Absolutely. The crowd really got behind him. I don't know quite what it was, but, you know, he was in good spirits all the time. He was... just another really good performance. And then Fabio was great, I thought, against David Adelaide. You don't ever want to criticise the loser too much, always concentrate on what the winner did, and I thought Fabio was really, really good. And considering how long he's been boxing, it is pretty surprising, actually, and really quite impressive how good he is. And I definitely feel like there's a lot more to come from him as well.
Fabio Wardley has got that target on his back. It's like everybody wants him. You've mentioned Fraser Clarke was there, Solomon Dakers was there, and it's like, yep, we want that fight. They're targeting the belt, but obviously Fabio's the one with it. Your thoughts on who should fight Fabio next? And basically, what should Fabio do?
It depends really whether he wants to try and win that British title outright or not. That might take a bit too long for him, I think, because he'll need 2 more defences. One will need to be a mandatory. I'm not sure if Adelaide was a mandatory or not, but he'll just want to take the biggest fight he can get. And Fraser Clarke is probably the biggest fight he could get. You know, he was on the podcast yesterday, the Sky podcast, for the second time, I think, in a few weeks, really, just banging the drum for that. So I think he's on a fight-by-fight deal. That's what he's always done. So that one was on a Frank Warren show, but I don't think he will have signed with him off the back of that. So I think he could go do what he likes, basically. So I think he'd be totally happy to take that Fraser Clarke fight. Solomon Dakers is English champion, so he's got a very strong claim. Had a quick chat with him over there. But the headline fight is him against Fraser Clarke. So I mean, I would expect that would happen next. It'd just be a question of, well, I'd imagine it would be on Sky because Fabio is, a free agent,
Your experience, and you've been in boxing for such a long time, analytical, I'd call you a critical thinker in the sport, somebody that is able to just be quite honest about it. Your experience with the amount of promoters that we've got, the fighters have got more choice of where they can go to. How does that then affect like the fans like me that look at people and think, oh, I'd love to see that fight, and then it's going to happen, and then it doesn't happen, the frustrations. But from your point of view?
I think maybe we're in a spell at the minute, and we have been this year, where the kind of catfighting, if you like, has got a bit worse than it has been in previous times. And that could be because we're very much in the thick of the digital age now, and the opportunity to speak in a number of different ways on a number of different platforms, almost 24 hours a day, is there if you choose to use it. I wouldn't say that anyone has been particularly worse than anyone else. It's just there's been a lot of he said, she said, which I don't think ever really moves a situation on necessarily. We've always had the problem of having different promoters with different networks. Recently we have anyway, since people started signing into exclusive deals. So it would be great if people could work together a bit more, but you have to be realistic about these things, and business can be done at times. Often it's when somebody gets mandated for a title and they want that title, and then it'll go to a purse bid, for example. But I think if a couple of the major players could start working together at the minute, then it would give them an advantage on everybody else. There are plenty of shows, and I would say that they're all of a decent enough standard, but maybe there haven't been too many really big ones this year. I think that would be a kind of a fair comment to make. And really, we just want the sport to be as buoyant as possible. And I've worked for everybody pretty much, and it's been mainly for Sky the last 7 or 8 years. And you do want whoever you're working for to have the best figures, but you should want everybody else to have good figures as well. Absolutely. Like, everybody have good figures, everybody do well, but just whoever your number one is does the best. That's how you should think about it. I just wonder whether it's just got a little bit too tribal and partisan recently. Possibly it has, but it's kind of, in a way, that's the game we're in.
And that's why I asked your opinion, because even though, like you said, you've worked for Sky, your loyalty is with Sky, you're able to still look at it like, on the horizon and say, yes, I get it, but let's move forward let us just work together and push those barriers. So then, say, for example, our country wins, the UK wins, we start to set an example for boxing promotions.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, everybody was talking about, a bit prematurely, because Joshua Buatsi had yet to beat Dan Aziz, but people were talking about if he did, then the fight with Anthony Yarde, and I did kind of feel like that cross promotion between Boxer and Queensberry and Sky and TNT, however it would have worked with a rematch and who would have gone first, and however it would have worked, I did get the feeling that was doable. And the noises I was hearing kind of from people independently outside of, because I don't really ask too much, in-house, because it's kind of not fair in a way, because I know that some people know the answer and I don't really want to put them under pressure to give me the answer. But what I'd heard from kind of independent sources was that there was a will there and therefore there was a way. And more of that would be great, wouldn't it? We had it with Joe Joyce and Joseph Parker. That was Boxer and Queensberry. There are more maybe than we think there are, but quite often it's when there's a mandatory situation. For a fight to be made purely independently between two houses, if you like, coming together, doesn't happen all that much.
But we're going to move on to the main event, and I will open this, and I've said it several times. I feel like I did Francis Ngannou a serious discredit by not giving him a chance at all, even though I hadn't watched any of his MMA fights. I just saw MMA boxer, mixed martial arts is going into a boxing ring. We're going to favour the boxer. You were there. Talk us through it.
Yeah, firstly, I don't feel like that was any great clanging error on your part. We all did that. And I think it was reasonable to assume that Fury would beat him comfortably, and that the best that Ngannou realistically could do would be to give Fury a relatively competitive spar. And I still maintain that that's what should have happened. The fact that it didn't, I think, was down to the fact mainly that Fury was woefully under par in that fight, and I think that he would admit that. Ngannou definitely was better than we thought. The footage he released was a smokescreen. When you looked at him in the ring, you could see his balance was good, his footwork was pretty good, he moved his head, his hand position was good, all that kind of stuff. He knew what he was doing. And those hands are heavy, because you're not going to knock somebody down with a left hand like that unless they are. But yeah, I still find it difficult to know. People have been talking off the back of his performance about him being a top 10 heavyweight maybe. I just don't see how you can tell that, because Fury was so far off where he normally is. It's difficult to measure Ngannou's performance. I hope he does stick around and box some more, because I think he's a very interesting addition. But I couldn't quite believe how bad Fury was, if I'm honest. And I think, he's held his hands up to it, hasn't he, and admitted it himself. I really couldn't believe it. And I was worried, because outside of the knockdown, not that much happened in that fight, to be honest with you. I don't think it was a scandal that Fury got the decision, but equally, Ngannou could have got the decision. That wouldn't have been, that card, 5 rounds all, and Ngannou winning by a point because of the knockdown. I could absolutely see that. It was a bit weird to watch, because I was just expecting Fury to get going and just start pumping out the jab and just think, okay, that's enough now. And it just never really happened.
Boxing is a funny old sport, and I think I used to put predictions on and say, oh yeah, definitely this is going to happen, and I stopped it for pro boxer versus pro boxer. You have your little gut feeling, but you'd never outwardly say it. But I still fell into that trap, as many of us did, with over predicting, overly confident, in what Tyson Fury could do. And I've mentioned this because how does that make him feel? He knows the boxing community was behind him, majority, to win this fight. We know that Tyson has suffered with mental health. We know that sometimes he can disappear and he's quite up and down with what he says. How do you think that will affect him? Because like you said, he's openly admitted it, and we saw his face quite battered and bruised the day after.
I don't feel like it'll affect him too much, to be honest, because I think he knows. He's been doing this a really, really long time, and he knows. He would have known during the fight that the timing was out, that nothing was really working, and he had to work in there to make sure, to get the win, as it turned out. I don't think I mean, the only thing I do think about it is that it looks like it'll be next year, but let's just say they did hold him to December the 23rd. I don't think that would be the worst thing, because he's been out of the ring for almost a year. I don't know what he did in training camp, but you can take your eye off the ball without neglecting your training. You can still do the runs and all the groundwork and all the sparring, but if you don't really feel like the bloke opposite you can beat you, then that can translate to a bad performance, and I think that's probably what happened. I feel like him getting straight back in there wouldn't be the worst thing. Have a couple of weeks off and then immediately refocus on something that really, really does matter and that you're absolutely never going to take lightly, and get that fire back and use the criticism as, you know, fuel, basically. Yeah, just use it, because they all do that. I don't think he's gonna lose his way off the back of this. I don't see that happening, because this fight, he has to have this fight with Usyk. It has to happen.
And I beg your pardon, we're actually here for Chris Billam-Smith World Championship bout with Matthias Masternak, an experienced, seasoned cruiserweight. And another thing that I think we should do as well is give Chris Billam-Smith his flowers. Obviously, I'm media, I'm on the outside, and I'm looking at all the controversies surrounding what's been happening with the cruiserweights, purse bids, mandatories, etc., etc. And all of that's been going on. And poor Chris Billam-Smith has got a world title. He's a world champion, and he hasn't been receiving that credit for it. And I will openly and honestly admit I'm one of those that's caught up in that controversy and has forgotten all about our world champion.
Yeah. I mean, he had that massive night in Bournemouth, and it got a lot of attention, and rightly so. I know what you mean, though, because Richard Riakporhe's kind of disappeared, and they've been trying to make a number of things happen for him, but nothing's happened. Goulamirian seems to be constantly on the verge of fighting someone, and then it doesn't happen. And I know he's had some managerial, contractual things going on, and it's all been a bit difficult. Opetaia obviously looked like he might be a possibility, and then he's signed with Matchroom and DAZN. Looked terrific against Jordan Thompson. But with Billam-Smith, I feel like he's very measured and balanced, and he's not going to let anything really upset him. And they've taken him back to Bournemouth, which is the right thing to do. And I think he's done the right thing in picking someone like Masternak, because he's a good fighter. There are much easier options he could have gone for, but it's better not to, because, as we saw at the weekend, you need someone who's going to put a bit of fear into you. And I think Masternak will put some fear into Billam-Smith, because amazingly it's Matthias's first world title fight, which is it's pretty incredible, that, because he won the European title in 2012 and he's been at that level, fringe world level, ever since. And he got an invite to the World Boxing Super Series the first time around, and that was a real select list, and gave Dorticos a really good fight. So what it tells you is that over the course of that 10 years, no one has called him and given him a voluntary until now, and there's a reason why no one's done it, because he's not that bloke that you know, he's not that fox that you let into the hen house if you're a champion. So credit to Billam-Smith for doing it, because he needs someone in front of him who's going to inspire that bit of fear in him, make him feel like if he's not on it he can lose, and that's it's a good approach. It's a good approach.
Chris Billam-Smith, I was speaking to Shane earlier. I'm not saying it's like the rags to the riches story, but it's like the nobody to the somebody story, where credit to Boxer and Sky Sports have really built him to where he is now with this World Championship belt. When you talk about formulas for building champions, and you look across like the promotional companies, how would you describe how Chris Billam-Smith has been built since he's joined the Boxer team?
I mean, they've done a good job with him. They have done a good job with him, but it's been well done right from the very beginning by the McGuigans, because they took a chance on him, because they could see that he had a great work ethic and he listened, and he was all in. You look at the job they did with someone like Josh Taylor. Perfect matchmaking, different scenario, because Josh is Josh, a star from the beginning. But with Billam-Smith, it's been equally as impressive, because they didn't feel like they had the raw materials to work with that they did with Josh Taylor, but they just got him up level by level by level, and he's responded every single time. And he had the defeat against Riakporhe, but it was one of those fights where he would have learnt more from that, from his wins, as we like to say often, but it's true. So he grew from that. It wasn't really any kind of a setback, and he does take things a step at a time. And he's always had that fan base. So Bournemouth was always that possibility. And he boxed on the South Coast before, but it is Boxer who, you know, arrived at the right time basically, and had no hesitation in taking him there. And it's such a great thing to be able to do, to sell out your local arena. You know, people are obsessed with going global, aren't they, now? Because potentially everybody's got that reach because of social media. But whoever you are, first of all, you want to concentrate on being able to sell out your local leisure centre. And if you can do that, then you're going somewhere. Because they stick with you. Those supporters will stick with you. They won't just disappear as soon as things start to go slightly wrong. They will be there. And that's what he's got. And I don't feel like, you know, if Chris keeps boxing at the top of the sport for, say, another 7 or 8 fights, which is probably what he wants to do, chances are he's going to lose one of them. Because if you operate at that level, that's just how it goes.
Absolutely.
But if it happens, I don't think it will affect his popularity in any way, shape or form, because he's in good fights, isn't he?
And those are the things that we love to see. Listen, we've been going for nearly half an hour. I said I wanted to borrow you for 10 minutes. Andy, from the first time we've done our live on IG, for you coming back here, it's an absolute pleasure and an honour. I love speaking boxing with you. Can't wait to see you in your blue shirt again.
Get some new stuff. I've got to get some.
Get different colours.
Yeah. Well, I live in East London. I live near Green Street, so I just need to go down and get them to kit me out, because that is the place for that. I should have gone before I went. That's why I had to recycle the same garment twice, which people have remarked upon that. I did get it washed and pressed, by the way.
We love it. Andy Clarke, until the next time.
Thanks very much.
Lovely. Absolutely lovely to